Everyone remembers 1929 as the year the world changed, but almost nobody remembers why it happened. They talk about the crash, the breadlines, the suicides from skyscraper windows, but they skip over the real story, the one that matters if you want to understand what's coming next. Because the conditions that built the Great Depression didn't vanish after 1933, they evolved. They adapted, and right now in 2025, they're assembling themselves again, hidden behind new language, new technology, and fresh confidence that this time will be different. It never is. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes loudly enough if you know how to listen. The warning signs are everywhere. Stock valuations are at levels unseen since the dot-com bubble. Artificial intelligence is the new miracle stock, just like radio was in the 1920s, drawing frenzied investment from people who don't understand the underlying assets. Tariff uncertainty is paralyzing business investment. Consumer sentiment is cracking. And the entire financial system, from banks to private credit markets, is perched on assumptions that have never been tested under real stress. The question isn't whether a crash is coming. History has answered that. The question is whether you understand what made 1929 so devastating and what makes today potentially worse. In 1929, the Dow Jones soared fourfold in 8 years. Stock prices disconnected completely from earnings. Investors borrowed up to 90% of their stock purchases on margin. Millions of ordinary Americans believed they'd found a perpetual money machine. The AI bubble today mirrors that speculation perfectly. Here's the crucial difference. In 1929, there was no FDIC insurance, no unemployment benefits, no Federal Reserve printing trillions. When banks failed, people lost everything. Over 9,000 American banks collapsed between 1929 and 1933. Unemployment soared past 25%. The economy contracted by more than 36%. Today's economy is different in structure, not vulnerability. We have the Federal Reserve. But we also have systemic interconnection. Every institution plugged into every other one. When one fails, dominoes tumble all at once. The warning signs are stacking up. Private credit markets are now critical players in the financial system, and almost nobody understands the risks. Corporate bond spreads are near all-time lows. Housing prices are near records, with unsold homes at levels not seen since 2009. The Warren Buffett indicator is at its highest point in history. Before the dot-com crash, it was at 140%. Right now, it's at 218%. This is the mathematical signature of a bubble, the same one preceding every major crash in modern history. Today's tariff policies are bringing trade protections to their highest levels since Smoot-Hawley. The Yale Budget Lab calculated that current tariffs cost the average household $2,400 in 2025 and lowered GDP by 0.5 percentage point. But the real damage is uncertainty. Firms don't know when the next tariff will hit. They've stopped investing. They've stopped hiring. Jobs created monthly have dropped by roughly 100,000. When business investment collapses, recessions follow. When recessions hit over-leveraged markets, crashes follow. Major banks weathered 2008 because of Dodd-Frank reforms. That's the good news, but the financial system has learned to work around regulations. Shadow banking is exploding. Private equity and crypto are speculative machines. When the next shock hits, these institutions won't have transparency. They'll implode quietly, dragging down entire pension funds. In 2008, Lehman Brothers looked too big to fail until it failed. SVB looked solid until it collapsed overnight. Regulators always see it coming. They just can't stop it. Crashes worse than 1929 aren't just financial, they're psychological. When people lose jobs and savings simultaneously, they lose faith in everything. They stop trusting governments, banks, the system itself, the economy fragments, credit freezes. Credit. Inequality explodes because those with assets buy up everything at fire sale prices, while those without fall further behind. It's not a crash, it's a transfer. Historically, transfers of that magnitude destabilize everything. So what separates a bad recession from a crash that becomes a depression? It's the moment when confidence cracks. In 1929, confidence cracked when margin calls came due. Investors who borrowed to buy stocks suddenly had to pay back loans with money they didn't have. They panicked. They sold. Prices collapsed. Margin calls accelerated the collapse. Today, confidence is cracking in the same way, just through different mechanisms. Stock valuations are so high that any disappointment triggers selling. Private credit markets are so opaque that any rumor triggers freezing. Tariff policy is so uncertain that any policy shift triggers restructuring. We're in the end game of a credit cycle that always ends the same way. The hardest part about predicting crashes is timing. Nobody knows if it's 6 months away or 2 years away. But the structural conditions are identical to every major crash in modern history: excessive leverage, disconnected valuations, regulatory uncertainty, geopolitical shocks, concentrated wealth in speculative assets, and most critically, complacency. The people making decisions right now are convinced this time is different. They've convinced themselves that technology or policy or Federal Reserve intervention will prevent collapse. They convinced themselves the same things in 1929. They convinced themselves again in 2008. Every generation believes its era has transcended the laws of finance. Every generation is wrong. What you need to understand is this. The 1929 crash didn't kill anyone directly, but the depression it triggered killed through desperation, through suicide, through malnutrition. The next crash won't just be financial, it will be social, it will be psychological, it will destroy the illusion that the system works for ordinary people, and when that illusion breaks, institutions break. Not immediately, but inevitably. That's why this isn't just about money. That's why it matters that you understand what's actually happening beneath the headlines. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. The next crash isn't coming. It's already being built right in front of us. And this time it might be worse than 1929 because we have more interconnection, more leverage, and more illusions to lose. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. The next crash won't look like 1929. But it may feel worse.